Morning Talk with Siki Mgabadeli.
It is 12 minutes past 9 here on SAFM 104 to 107. Looking this morning at the case of Henry Banda, the son of former Zambian President Henry Banda, and we'll take calls as well on 0891 104 207. SMSs to 34701. Joining us on the line from the UK is Robert Amsterdam, who is Henry Banda's legal counsel. Robert, thank you very much for your time this morning.
My pleasure.
Well, let's start with where things stand at the moment before we get to what you think the allegations are, because from what I understand, Henry Banda has not been charged. You are not quite clear on what those charges are to begin with. But where do things stand at the moment?
Well, that's why your introduction seems to sum up what the Zambians want others to think. They want people to think somehow that Henry has done something violative of the law when he's done absolutely nothing of the kind. They have no evidence about it, which is why they've embarrassed themselves by going wildly public with allegations against my client without any substantiation. And what they really want is, allegedly, to interview Henry on a variety of topics concerning his activities during the time his father was in office, when they appear to have disregarded the fact that Henry was a very successful businessman before his father was in office and had managed to establish himself and his business activities with tremendous success independent of his father. This entire witch hunt against Henry is part of a broader campaign by the Zambian government to destroy political opposition within the country. It's actually directed at Henry's father and other members of the MMD, which was the major opposition party which gave up power. And literally almost the entire top echelon of that party has been subject to police interrogation. Henry's entire family's been subject to police interrogation. And this was all done within days of Mr. Sata taking office. It's not like there had been some independent investigation. Mr. Sata's Popular Front Party, modeled on Mugabe's party, took over, and they began a campaign to destroy and discredit the opposition. And there's absolutely, in terms of this privatization, what's humorous is Zamtel was bankrupt, and the privatization of Zamtel has been considered one of the most successful privatizations in the history of Southern Africa.
And it's been cancelled, though, that deal.
Well, in fact, it's worse than that. First they privatize, receive all the funds, pay off all the pensions, and then of the former workers, and now they've seized it back from the people that acquired it at what could be a massive cost to the Zambian people, because they've been sued for upwards of $500 million.
Yeah. We're going to get to that, and I want to talk a bit about the broader campaign and what Henry Banda's own response to all of this is. But from what I understand, he's been placed on the Interpol red list as a wanted person. Now, on what grounds would one be put on an Interpol red list if there isn't some sort of suspicion or charges being laid?
This is one of the things that we need to educate people about. Iran, Cuba, and Russia regularly use the Interpol list to add political enemies. It does not take very much at all. As you've just heard, Mr. Banda is not even charged with anything. They simply want him for questioning, and we've offered him for questioning. But in spite of all that, they have arbitrarily, and in my view, immorally put this man on an Interpol list because it taints somebody. As soon as you say that, there's a stigma attached. And we have sent a submission to Interpol concerning the abuse of their own internal rules, which specifically stipulate that Interpol cannot be used for political purposes.
So you have offered him for questioning. What response did you get?
Well, we've offered him for questioning in South Africa because if their goal is not to intimidate or to in any way engage in illegal conduct, and if they're really in search of the truth, we want to offer them that possibility.
Yeah.
We've had absolutely no response. And we have been fighting a bad faith, illegal campaign by a political party that's taken control of the government and instrumentalized key aspects. For instance, appointing a director of public prosecutions who himself had been charged with earlier offenses, who himself right now stands condemned to pay back massive amounts of money in respect to an airplane deal gone awry. And after that judgment came out, the president suspended the judge who gave that judgment against the DPP and has now called in a judge from Malawi to sit in judgment on Zambian judges.
Yeah.
I mean, what South Africa needs to take a look at is what has been happening to Zambia since the SADC government's come into power.
And what is your understanding of the South African authorities' standpoint on this? At first they'd said that they can't hand him over without detailed charges, and now we understand that they may hand him over to avoid a diplomatic row.
I have no belief that South Africa would ever violate its constitutional guarantees to do that. And we have every confidence in the South African system. South Africa is blessed with perhaps the most advanced constitutional protections in the world today. And I know Mr. Banda considers himself very fortunate to be in South Africa at this time.
And why, as you said, they want to interview him. Why not go back home? What do you fear is going to happen to him? Should he go back?
Well, listen, I mean, the last thing I would recommend to a client facing a political persecution like this is to go back when we have absolutely no clarity as to what they're even investigating. And remember, when you have people who are not, you believe, not operating in good faith, and you subject a client to the unlimited power of the state, the intimidating impact that people have to throw men and women behind bars for no reason, that would be a terrible dereliction of my duty to hand over a client. And I can tell you, I do many of these political type cases, and one client of mine, his name is Kordakovsky. He was subject to a vicious attack by the Russian government, who seized his oil company, and he, facing these threats, went back. It is 8 years later. He is still illegally being detained in Russian jails after almost every independent body in the world has condemned those political trials.
So you fear that something similar might happen, and you would not be able to walk out of those institutions?
You know, incredible about what's happening in Zambia is that they are distorting the very idea of rule of law. Mr. Sada appears not to trust his own judiciary. He has set up commission of inquiry after commission of inquiry. He's told the judges what he wants to get in terms of results, and he's angry when he doesn't get them. We have a massive level of interference in due process and rule of law by a man who models himself on Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe.
We're going to take calls on 0891 104 207, 0891 104 207, SMSs to 34701, in conversation with Robert Amsterdam, who is Henry Banda's legal counsel.
Morning Talk on SAFM.
In conversation this morning with Robert Amsterdam, who is Henry Banda's legal counsel, and talking this morning at the case. Well, clearly, as we said earlier, we're not quite clear what the charges are, as Mr. Henry Banda has himself not been furnished with whatever allegations. But as you heard earlier from Robert Amsterdam, what we'd said a little bit earlier about what the Zambian government is suggesting here is that he's wanted for fraud in connection with the $257 million sale of Zamtel to Lap Green Networks of Libya, and that particular sale has been reversed now, and the government of Zambia claiming that it was fraudulent and irregular. So we're going to take calls on this one on 0891 104 207, SMSs to 34701. Let's take a call from Mubipa in Maseru. Good morning.
Good morning, Siki.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Okay, Siki, yeah. Two comments I would like to make.
Yeah.
The first one, I think, is just an observation that Robert, as the lawyer for Henry Banda, I'm a Zambian myself, is trying to politicize a criminal investigation. He is accusing the Zambian authorities of politicizing this issue. He is the one who is politicizing it. For starters, he has not made Henry available for investigations. All he needs to do is to travel to Zambia, to travel to Lusaka with his client, and let his clients answer the questions, and for sure he will receive a fair hearing. Now, I'm making this statement on the basis that Henry's elder brother, who is also facing some accusations, is actually Zambia's deputy high commissioner to India. He recently traveled to Lusaka. As I'm speaking, he's still in Lusaka. And he has not been locked up for unreasonably. He is being interviewed, he is being asked questions, and if nothing comes out of that case, he will go back to India to continue with his job of serving the government. He is his elder brother. So the hullabaloo that Robert is throwing around in media all over, claiming that if Henry goes to Zambia, his life is in danger, creating this picture, is completely nonsense. And I think he should stop it. He's been doing it all around. I'm speaking as an independent Zambian who is just completely nauseated by the attitude that Robert is taking. Let him go to Zambia with his client, first the questions, and then he can tell the whole world that there's nothing that has come out of that, instead of trying to defend without actually being asked questions.
All right.
The second issue that he is throwing around is that the president of Microsata, I may not even be a supporter of PF myself. By the way, it's not it's a patriotic front. That's the name of the party. He is claiming that the party is on a warpath to destroy the opposition. What has that got to do with Henry Banda? Because if he is saying Henry Banda is actually independent of his father as a president, it means Henry Banda is not part of the opposition. So he is trying to confuse things here, talking about the opposition and talking about the issue which is a pure fraud or criminal investigation.
Right.
That's the comment I would like to make.
Thanks, Mabiba. I'll get a response for you. Let's hear from Philip in KZN. Morning.
Yes, Suzuki.
Hi.
Yes. You know, Suzuki, Zambia is our second home in South Africa. We wouldn't have our freedom without the Zambians. It's a pity in our studio. We have a man of American accent. The same people whom, when they dissolved the Reagan administration, they decided to attack UNIP of Ubaba KK Kaunda through the union, which was actually driven from America to destroy the revolution in Zambia.
Philip?
Is now representing...
Philip?
Hello?
Can you do me a favor? Can we talk about Henry Banda's case, please?
No, I am coming to this.
Yeah, but I need you to be there because that's what we're talking about.
The man is claiming to be representing the son of the president, of the former president. You know, just like President Zuma, as his son is owing some millions of rands through his lavish weddings. We cannot allow these people. These people want to create conflict amongst Africans.
Who are these people?
That man must go to hell because...
Philip.
Yes, Vicky.
We can when we argue and we debate, we don't tell people to go to hell. Now, no. Do me a favor. I asked you a question and you didn't answer it. Who are these people?
Okay, Ziggy, let me move on, Ziggy. You see, Ziggy, as Africans, Americans are the ones who created the turmoil we are in South Africa because they realized IPAD, which was driven by President Thabo Mbeki, was going to dislodge them from looting our own resources, even in South Africa and Africa as a whole.
All right. Now, well, you're not coming back to Henry Banda. You're not. He is representing Henry Banda. He's his lawyer, which means, and he's also representing.
He must go and represent Americans who are killing.
I get. Bye, Philip. Yeah. Can we stick to the topic, please? And I don't mind contextualizing it. And I mean, he did talk about the relationship that South Africa has had with Zambia. We all understand that. But I want us to talk about this particular case where, on the one hand, somebody has not had charges laid against them. They don't know what they're going to be charged with. They're worried about going back home, fearing, as they say, for their lives. On the other hand, the Zambian government saying they've got a strong case and they want to interview this person. And we're going to take calls.
Could I clarify that?
Yes.
They're not saying they have a strong case. And again, you use the word fraud. There's no allegation of fraud. You may have gotten that from a newspaper. Mr. Banda had nothing to do with the privatization of Zamtel, and that's come out in their own commission of inquiry. The point is, what the government of Zambia wants you to do is keep repeating this. None of that's the truth. They want him for questioning for unspecified activities. They have conducted a newspaper and radio attack on this man for weeks and weeks, alleging somehow he had evaded justice, when in fact they had letters from South African lawyers as well as myself stating exactly where he was. And in terms of other members of his family being interrogated, and that, we're trying to stir something up, let them look at the statement of the opposition leaders in Zambia recently, where the opposition has decried the attacks, not only on people involved with the MMD, but with other opposition parties. This is much broader than just a case of Henry Banda.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because you're saying that they know that he was not involved in this, but what they are alleging is that he connived with the former Communications and Transport Minister, Doris Leah, in 2008 to...
No, they're not alleging that, actually. I keep saying this. The problem is, and we'd be happy to answer that because he wasn't involved, although we believe it was a very positive transaction for Zambia. So that's point one. The other point to all of this, and I take very seriously the fact that Zambia was a frontline state, and I know many of your listeners feel they owe a debt, and I fully agree with it. But that's got nothing to do with the absence of rule of law in Zambia. I do these political cases in Thailand, in Russia, in Ghana, all over. And I'll tell you, the issue for me is that rule of law and human rights, as seen in the South African Constitution, are universal. And while Mr. Banda is an innocent man charged with nothing, it is outrageous that the government has managed to allow people such as yourself to read off charges that are in papers which they can in no way substantiate. This man is innocent. This man has done absolutely nothing wrong, and yet he faces vituperative comments, even an introduction such as you gave. By the time you're finished, he sounds guilty. But the man had no involvement in that.
Then why not?
They've alleged he was involved in some gold issues.
Then why not go back home and answer those questions? Here, Mobipa, who is himself a Zambian, is saying that why doesn't he go home then and answer those, whatever those questions are, and you can travel with him?
And you know what's happened already? Doris Leah, who has stayed in the country, was jailed. Now, she was released after she was bailed 48 hours later, but they have done absolutely nothing to provide reasonable safeguards. They have, again, as I've said, they have demonstrated an absence of good faith by going after an entire panoply of MMD leaders. Mr. Banda did assist his father in terms of the campaign. In fact, what the Zambians have done is they've immobilized an entire fleet of trucks that the MMD would have used in recent elections. They've immobilized them on the pretext of these bogus charges. If the government actually had something to say, why wouldn't they demonstrate it by putting real charges together? Let's put the shoe on the other foot. Why do we have to have Mr. Banda risk anything by going to Zambia when the Zambian government has a director of public prosecutions who in no way can be viewed as impartial, whom the opposition in Zambia today has demanded resign, when the government cannot even put together a slate of charges? It is an embarrassment to Zambia, the conduct of the government. And if you take a look at some of the Zambian press, like the Zambian Watchdog, you can read how embarrassed and how angry many people are in Zambia by what's been going on.
Would you accept a neutral venue, let's say a United Nations type setup for questioning?
Listen, we accept South Africa. If they're really interested in meeting with Mr. Banda and they don't need the intimidation of all sorts of special police, let them come and meet with him in his lawyer's office and answer any questions. We've offered that for months. But they're not interested in the truth. That's our point.
All right, we're going to take more calls, and I'm going to pick up on that point that Mubiba was making, saying that you're the one who's... what did he say? You're the one who's politicizing a criminal investigation. But we'll pick up on that, Robert, in a moment. And we'll take more calls on 0891 104 207, 0891 104 207, SMSs to 34701. Taking calls on 0891 104 207, SMSs to 34701, in conversation with Robert Amsterdam, who is Henry Banda's legal counsel. Let's read some of those SMSs. In fact, before we do that, Robert, do you want to deal with what Mubiba was saying, that you are the one who's politicizing what he terms a criminal investigation?
Well, again, I always find it interesting that a state with its unlimited power and its ability to manipulate the press, as has happened in Zambia, could go out every day with newspaper articles making mindless accusations about my client. And when I step in after this goes on for months and say enough is enough, and tell the leader of the Patriotic Front, who had been point man on this, Winter Kabimba, that he has destroyed any possibility of a fair hearing for my client, I'm told that I'm somehow politicizing. Mr. Kabimba called me a mad dog of war. I mean, the conduct of Kabimba and the Popular Front, and by the way, their conduct has nothing to do with the Constitution of Zambia. The Patriotic Front seems to run on its own sets of rules and regulations. But that conduct has made the possibility of Henry getting a fair hearing almost impossible in any event, because you've had government spokesman after government spokesman condemning my client before there's even been an investigation. Just because you call something criminal and you're the government doesn't mean that it's not fraudulent, because I would argue the only fraud I've seen in any of this is the behavior of the government, which is pretending to act properly when in fact it is engaged in a political vendetta of a massive proportion. And it's being caught out in Zambia by members of NGOs and civil society who have started to rise up against the illegal conduct of the Sada regime.
Well, one of the things that you've said is that international norms of due process, rule of law, and constitutional separation of powers have been violated in this case. Just explain that to us.
When you have an independent investigative arm in a country, and you have an independent judiciary, as many would argue in Zambia in terms of the judiciary still may exist, before Mr. Sada suspended a number of them, you can sense it by a number of things. One of them is investigations actually occur. And in the Banda case, what's really fascinating is Mr. Banda was given a hit list the day of Sada's inauguration. And the next day, and that hit list involved political targets, the next day the Sada government started to make announcements about corruption. Well, if you're familiar with a rule of law state, you understand that to have an actual investigation means you spend some time and effort to pull together information. That normally takes months. In the case of what happened in Zambia, they started to drag in leaders of the MMD within weeks of taking office. And it was very clear that this was entirely pretextual. Very clear. Mr. Sada came up with this anti-corruption campaign. And what I've done in Zambia, because I've made all of these allegations in the Zambian press, I've said, Mr. Sada, there is actually very lax election law finance rules, but if you're so concerned about it, why don't you come clean with who's financing the Popular Front? And why don't you come clean with the same standards you're demanding of the opposition? Because at the end of the day, what we've seen in all the articles about my client alleging he's a fugitive and all of these allegations is absolutely zero substance. And that's the other point that people need to understand. It should not be an innocent man who takes on the state, a state that is acting wrongly and arbitrarily. He shouldn't face a presumption against him when he voluntarily agrees to face questioning, with the only issue being where that takes place. If people are truth seekers, they can do it in a neutral location, and at least then get together enough evidence to come up with a credible charge. In Henry Banda's case, they've done neither. Rather, they resorted to the press weeks before he had counsel appointed. They resorted to the press to castigate him as a criminal, because in the world today, corrupt states use their criminal law power to taint opponents. It happens every day all over the world. And we need to be able to see through the headlines and understand that innocent people are often persecuted simply because of either their political beliefs or their political actions. And that's why rules of asylum and rules respecting political opponents need to always be respected, because we can't be safe in our own country if we don't allow others to seek protection as well.
Besides Dora Silia, who else in the opposition has been, or would you say has been harassed?
Well, again, you don't have to. You can just go on the watchdog. There's literally dozens, and not just from the MMD, also from the other political party, the other major party, the UNDP in Zambia, which has spoken out. And the harassment, by the way, is not just with pretextual investigations. There have been some beatings. There's been some intimidation. Since the Patriotic Front has got into power, they seem to have done everything they can to stigmatize and to retard the ability of the opposition. It's reached a level where the opposition sought meetings with some of the donor countries, and President Sata yesterday angrily responded that other countries should not interfere in the internal affairs of Zambia.
Let's hear from Somi in Durban. Morning.
Morning to you. Let's be fair here. I know that it's not a political discussion. However, you allow this guy to talk politics and not stick to the case. He's making allegations that are unfounded, and I don't know whether he's submitted anything to you to say, yes, these allegations can be justified. He comes on air to attack, the typical American enemies, Cuba, Russia, Zimbabwe, and that thing. He's not sticking to the case himself. He sounds to me more like a human rights lawyer than a defense lawyer to defend this guy, his client. He needs to take his client to Zambia. He needs to ask for guarantees. Of course, if Zambia is a member of the what do you call this international international conventions, they can be compelled, to give those guarantees. Take his client there and then face the music. If he's clean, then, he's going to come back. Like the other caller said, his own brother is back in Zambia to face the music, and, there are no threats against his life. He said there's a good chance that the guy's going to go back to his job in India. You see, seriously, Mr. Amsterdam makes me sick with his political rants, because they're unfounded as far as I'm concerned.
So even though there are other people who have been harassed, Msomi, and this is not something that Mr. Amsterdam is making up, one only has to have a look not only at Zambian media, but also at other human rights organizations' websites who list people who have been harassed.
Yes, granted that, but I thought you were talking about this guy's case. Now, if by politicizing the case, he's trying to wage a war against the human rights violations in the world, fine, that's one thing. But, the case is about this guy having done something wrong. I'm not sure how this thing works. How can the Interpol have someone's name on the list if there are no charges? Because one of the requirements should be there must have been charges, and there must have been those charges. I'm not sure how that works. But here it's about this guy who's supposed to have not sure whether he's embezzled or posed a due influence to get the deal done. We don't know the facts. The fact. the issue is about this guy going back home to face the music. Let's deal with that and let's stop the politics. If he says, I've got the proof, I've got evidence to say that, if he goes back there, he's not going to get he's not going to get justice. Then, let's look at that. But he knows very well that South Africa would step in to assist Mr. Banda if, the Zambian system is not working well.
All right. Let me hear what Robert has to say to that. Robert?
Firstly, I agree with much of what your listener, as far as I'm concerned, had a lot of it right, in the sense that South Africa needs to step in. But we're going to do it while Henry's still in South Africa. We're not going to subject him to a situation that starts the wrong attitude. The Zambian starts with appointing a director of public prosecutions who in no way can be seen as fair and independent. Remove Mr. Nchito, as the opposition is demanding, and start getting back to rule of law, and we would be very open to reconsidering the situation. We take the point that it is the Zambians who have politicized this case from day one. In fact, it's not a case. And your caller says, face the music. We don't even know the conductor of the music. We don't even know what the music is.
Yeah.
There's nothing to face. And that's the other point of all this. We have a government that's issued, as you've read, all sorts of allegations without any substantiation at all. They've already subjected him to trial by headline for weeks and weeks. Why is it for us to give them the presumption of innocence, to think that after they've done all this, somehow they're going to treat Henry fairly? It's absolutely ridiculous.
Now, he was saying something about you asking for guarantees that surely the Zambians are signatories to a number of conventions and they would have to treat him in a certain way.
Well, look, let's be clear. Many countries in the world, including Russia, by the way, are signatories. That doesn't mean they obey them. And, I think it's important that I say to your listeners, they hear an American accent, they immediately make a million assumptions. I'm counsel in Thailand to 15 million Thai peasants who have spent a long time subject to the vagaries and interests of the United States, and I've represented them against the interests of the United States. Just because of someone's accent, just because where someone has come, does not mean that your listeners have a right to prejudge their views or motives as well. I think we've all got to get out of the business of prejudging.
Let's hear from Joseph in Kokstad. Hi, Joseph.
Hi, good morning, Siki, and your panelists. Yes. Siki, there's one point I just want to make. It's so sad that you would hear people saying that Zambia was our home, which is very true. But comparing the former Zambia with the current Zambia, why people are running away from Zambia? Why people are scared to go back to Zambia? So why don't these guys come to South Africa? It's a neutral base. It's a neutral venue. It's just close by Zambia. Why they don't come to South Africa and then interrogate this guy or ask him the questions that they want to ask him? Yeah. He must not risk his life, go back to Zambia, and you've got some people comparing the former Zambia with the current Zambia, and there are people being interrogated that are put in jail without trial, beaten. He must not do that.
All right.
They must come to South Africa and ask the questions they want to ask this guy here in South Africa.
All right. Thanks, Joseph. And you would accept, because I think that's one of the things you said, Robert, that you want them to come to South Africa, so you'd accept South Africa as a neutral venue, right?
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to read some SMSs because I haven't done that, and then I'm going to take more calls. Someone says, is it David Mtunzi in Mafikeng, says, in order for the change of guards to have their stamp of authority, they will always chase those who were formerly in higher places. And another one says, why can't they question him at a neutral venue, a UN office, etc.? And another one says, Siki, that's personal. And another one says, that's Dick and Nelspread says, why is this man defending the criminal MMD party? And Sam Shiloh and Guyana says, Siki, this topic is polluting the good atmosphere of your radio show. And Castro in Midrand says, why is your guest calling a democratically elected government a corrupt state? Is his Obama administration also corrupt? All right, that's Castro in Midrand. Let's hear from Leslie. Okay, we seem to have lost. Leslie, do you want to respond to the SMSs, Robert?
Well, I would, again, I'm not here defending the Obama administration. Yeah. So when I say, I think one of the things that's important is you can have someone democratically elected, but to stay democratic, you need to respect the separation of powers and the Constitution. And what we're arguing is that separation of powers has not been respected. It's been abused. We need a new independent director of public prosecutions, and we need some fairness established back in Zambia and an end to the harassment of the political opposition in Zambia.
Here's a tweet from Bafedile who says, it seems to be the norm in Africa that the minute a president steps down, his allies start facing charges. Sounds vindictive. And Tabo says it's a good way to weaken the opposition and consolidate power. And another one says, but this is ridiculous. If the guys are corrupt, charge them there and then. Don't set a trap using people's votes. Mark in Barberton, good morning.
Good morning, Susan. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
I'm good. I'm a bit disappointed with my fellow callers on SFM, those who seem to want to, opt not to look at the core issues and want to attack a person who represents somebody else. They are forgetting we are majority represented by white lawyers in South Africa. They never call them Afrikaners and whatever. But moving away, it's a sad trend in Africa, if you were to look, starting from the Great Lakes in Congo DRC. When the son of Laurent Kabila became a president, in his first term, I suppose, before it was finished, there was an agreement that they will go into a shared government, what was a government of national unity. Subsequently, the International Tribunal Court was used so that he could be removed. This other guy, John Pierre Bemba, was then taken away as a criminal. As a criminal. Yeah. You come down to, I forgot the other president now, who had a stroke right after he left office, and also he was subjected to corruption investigation. If it's not Zambia, it will be somewhere in Uganda. And you come back here at home also. Here we've got state apparatus has been used against political opponents. And this thing seems to be a trend, as I'm saying, and it sets a bad precedent because this thing is never going to end, because whoever will come after, if you were a president, I come in, I must now start to attack you because I know you're a formidable opposition and you've been here, you've been in power before me. So the case here should be, let's look exactly on the issues, because this is not just a fast thing. The question should be, if the country of Zambia had criminal cases, they should have first either investigated, and then this guy ran away after he appeared in court, and then send him to Interpol as a fugitive. But no, they pronounce that he's a criminal before even probably go before court, and thereafter shift his name to the Interpol. Thereafter they make him an international fugitive. Had South Africa also found reason that there was something substantive against this guy, they would have probably handed him over to Interpol.
Thanks, Mark. And I mean, one of the things that the South African government at the time had said is that they need detailed charges before they would extradite anyone. Richard in Pretoria, good morning.
Hi, Siki. I have a simple question for your guest today. Now, supposing there's an acceptance of South Africa being a neutral venue where questions may be asked, and supposing this person that is accused, and probably wrongfully so, it is found that these suspicions hold, there is something he has done, would he agree that this person must now be handcuffed and bundled into a plane and back to Zambia?
All right. I'll get a response for you. Thanks. Let's take one more call. Bomela in Mangawong. Morning.
Morning, Siki. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Yeah, just two things. One, to just get clarity from Robert, his client is suspected to have committed an offense which would, under normal circumstances, be
be regulated by domestic laws in Zambia. If that is the case, what he asks now, as I understand him, is that South Africa must tell the Zambian government to remove the DPP who is partisan. Can South Africa really do that? Under domestic laws of Zambia, understanding international law principles around sovereignty and really the forum, the proper forum, he can then bring these issues to the fore. Because South Africa as a state courteously must respect Zambia as a state. So can really South Africa offer that which they are asking?
All right. Let me hear what Robert has to say, and then we'll deal with it. I think let's start with the question of sovereignty, and then we'll deal with Richard's question as well.
Well, look, firstly, I just have to say that these have been some really intelligent questions, and I think the answers are the following. Human rights are universal. Many countries in Africa over-exaggerate issues of sovereignty in the sense that when human rights are violated, it is not only not a violation, but it's incumbent upon states to speak out. We are not asking, however, South Africa to do that.
Yeah.
We're
Robert? Oh, dear. All right, let's see if we can sort that line out.
Domestic.
Oh, there you are. Sorry, we lost you there for a moment. You were
sorry.
saying you are not asking South Africa to?
Well, I was just saying that we're not asking South Africa to remove the DPP. We're asking Zambia directly, the SADC government, to do that, and we're not alone. There are many lawmakers in Zambia who are asking the same thing. So we're not asking for any violation of sovereignty, but as I said, I think legally all states should interfere when human rights are being violated.
And Richard's question, if the suspicion is found to hold, will you allow him to be bundled onto a plane back to Zambia?
Well, people don't get bundled onto a plane. We will, as we always have, support due process. And what we're prepared to say at this point is we're prepared to have him answer reasonable questions, and that's all we can say. But we are, to that extent, certainly willing to assist an independent investigation that is in accord with due process. But your caller was absolutely right that it's really wrong and improper for the Zambians to have run to Interpol rather than to sit down with this man and ask him some questions. And it says a lot about their motivation.
Oh, and which international bodies have you approached to represent some appeals against what is taking place here?
We went to the United Nations.
Yeah.
And we intend to consider other international bodies, but we went to a number of the rapporteurs to complain about Henry's treatment, the comments that have been taking place by the government against both myself and Henry, and about the series of breaches of rule of law and basic universal freedoms, including the presumption of innocence and the right to association, and the attacks on Henry for his political activities, which are completely not in conformity with international as well as Zambian domestic law.
We'll have to leave it there. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you so much.
That's Robert Amsterdam, who is Henry Banda's legal counsel. Henry Banda's legal counsel. Henry Banda's legal counsel. Henry Banda's legal counsel. Henry Banda's legal counsel.